The city of Rochester, New York is looking at a good cause eviction law that would guarantee lease renewals and supposedly end unfair evictions. However, it would put a mandate on landlords that would cost them thousands and take away their ability to make their own business decisions. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting topic for you today, and it's going over good cause eviction in New York State, in particular in Rochester, which is in upstate New York. Now, normally when I'm talking about New York, I'm talking about New York City, but Rochester is actually looking at this good cause eviction legislation, and they're like, hey, we want to do it. We want to put these rules in place that would make it so that a landlord would be forced to renew leases. Okay? Bad idea. Very, very bad idea. And as I've mentioned many times before, there are a multitude of reasons that are not covered by the law of why a landlord might not want to renew a lease. And having to go to court to be able to remove a tenant is going to be very costly, and it's going to end up, being added on to what the monthly rents are. So you're going to see increased rent costs. You're going to see landlords doing a lot more thorough screening. It's going to be more difficult for tenants to be able to find housing, and especially affordable housing. So upstate New York is known to be much more affordable than New York City, but if you want to see the end of that, keep on passing these stupid rules and regulations that make landlords, have to increase their rents. So this is part of the reason also that you'll be seeing proposals coming up for statewide rent control, okay? Because they realize that, oh man, you know what? The rents are rising up here now. Well, you know what? You pass these laws, you pass these rules, you pass these regulations, and then you didn't expect there to be unintended consequences. Well, the unintended consequence of all that garbage is increased rents and harder ability for tenants to find affordable housing. So, this is not unexpected. So I have two articles. One is kind of going over what exactly the proposal for the law entails, and the other one is talking about how a large number of landlords in the city are going to be exempt, and so a lot of people will not be protected by this. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Do you believe that good cause eviction legislation will lead to higher rents? Okay, I've explained why I believe it is so, but a lot of people are telling me, oh, no, that won't happen. That won't happen. Those same people are just, living in fantasy land. That's what my personal belief is. If you don't think that rents are going to go up because of these increased regulations, you're out of your mind. Anyway, let me get into the first of these two articles. This article is coming from RochesterFirst.com, and it says, good cause eviction advocates speak out in Rochester. Let's see what it says. Housing advocates joined city leaders in Rochester Wednesday to advocate for the passage of strong good cause eviction legislation. If enacted here in Rochester, advocates say it would protect renters from rate hikes, unfair evictions, and help to guarantee lease renewals to renters who pay rent on time. One Rochester mother says she came here from Guatemala in hopes of providing a fresh start for her 7 kids. She says she's been battling with landlords for years and is scared of becoming homeless again. Wouldn't doubt it if she was illegal, but that's a different story. Anyway, if you notice that in the second paragraph I read, it says that the legislation would actually protect renters from rate hikes, because if you increase your rent over a certain amount, they consider that to be essentially an eviction, right? And so renters are protected against it. You have to go and justify why you need to be able to raise your rent that much. So kind of a backdoor way that they're implementing rent control, okay? I don't like this sort of stuff. I don't think that you should be tying a rent control provision into this. I don't think that either one should exist, but this is even worse than you think it is, because it's going to create essentially a 2-tier system for rental properties within the city. Rental properties that are forced to abide by these rules, and rental properties that are not. And the smart landlords, they're going to figure out ways to get around it. The landlords who are small mom and pops, they might end up stuck under it and suffer financially because of it. So let me continue. We're desperately searching for a new place, spending dollar after dollar on application fees to view apartments. Good cause eviction legislation supporter Yadira Suseth said. However, unregulated rents in Rochester are making it impossible to find an affordable home. Landlords are charging more and more for poorly maintained apartments. I would like us to pass the strongest version of this legislation in Rochester, as other cities in New York State have, Rochester City Council member Mary Lupian said. Right now, what we have introduced is the weakest version of this legislation. So, yeah, the strongest version of the legislation, the weakest, it doesn't matter. Legislation sucks. It's bad for landlords. It's bad for business. And if you tie rent control policies into it as well, what do you think the result is going to be? There's going to be a lot of landlords who say, hey, I don't even want to deal with this nonsense anymore. Remember, Rochester, New York is not an island, okay? And this is something that I have to remind people of all the time. Your little city is not an island. Regardless of if you think that your city is attracting all of the people in the area or not, right? What I have seen is that you put this rent control policy in your city, the investment, the dollars, the money will move right outside your city limits, okay? They will move to the suburbs. It will be, landlords like me, we're just going to be like, I'm not even looking in the city because I don't want to deal with your garbage. And I'm going to look right outside, right next door, a few miles away, like you're not an island. This isn't the big island of Hawaii here, where they can pass a law and then, well, you're stuck because there's nothing but, the island and the ocean. It doesn't work that way. So yeah, there are options for landlords to invest outside of your city limits and not have to deal with your nonsense. And that, when I talk about when St. Paul, Minnesota implemented their insane rent control law, that's exactly what happened. Okay, those developers, those real estate investors, those landlords who were in the city limits, who were planning on investing in the city limits, they just simply moved outside of the city limits, and they had a large metropolitan area in which to invest where they didn't have to deal with those stupid rent control rules. So keep that in mind when you're about to pass this nonsense, okay? Okay, so I'm going to skip over to the second article now, and it's going to talk about how there is a way for landlords to get around this, right? At least the way it's proposed. This article is coming from 13WHAM.com, and it says, Rochester City Council says new eviction law would exclude 35,000 renters. So yeah, the City Council says 35,000 renters within the city would be excluded from this, right? Now, I was like, okay, that sounds like a lot to me. So I looked up the population statistics for the city of Rochester, New York. The city has about 209,000 people live within the city limits, okay? And so I would say, I don't know for sure, but, I'm assuming that at least half of the people who live in the city are renters. So, we're talking about 105,000 people there. So we're talking about probably 30% or more of the renters within the city are going to be excluded from the new law. Why so many? Well, let me get into the article and we'll see what it says. City council members rallied Wednesday for legislation they say will better protect Rochester renters. Members introduced a good cause eviction proposal last month that would require landlords to provide a good cause, such as non-payment or violating lease terms, to evict the tenant. Councilmember Kim Smith, Stanley Martin, and Mary Lupian said the legislation doesn't go far enough as it does not apply to landlords who own fewer than 10 units. And that's the key right there. Okay, keep in mind that the majority of landlords out there do not own more than 10 units. Okay, and there's ways even for larger landlords to get around the 10 unit cap. And they actually explain that here in the article. Let me continue. LLCs can be spun up per house, and it's extremely difficult to find out who's behind the LLC, said Lupian. One owner could have an LLC for this house and for that house, and it's 1 unit or 4 units, whatever is in the house. So it will fall under the 10. It's very easy to get around this legislation as written if we pass it. The council member said if the current version of the legislation is passed, it would exclude around 35,000 renters, leaving them vulnerable to no-cause evictions. So just as an example, let's say that you are a property owner and you own 100 single-family homes, okay? Well, you just have 10 LLCs. Each LLC owns 10 houses, and guess what? Now you don't have to abide by the rules of the good cause eviction law. Even though you own 100 units, each different business actually is the owner of the properties. So guess what? Now, you with your 100 units get around the law. So that's what the council member is worried about, because they're like, oh, well, this isn't right. This isn't right. Well, you're giving us an out. You're giving landlords a way to get around your law. I like that. I think that's good. I don't like the law in general, right? But the savvy landlords out there are going to use that method that you described in this newspaper article as a way around the law. So at least there's a small way that at least some landlords will be able to get out of this nonsense. But overall, I'm sure that if things don't work out the way you originally planned, you'll just vote to change the laws at some point in the future. And, this nonsense, it's got to stop. It's got to stop. We're going to come to a point where you're just sitting there and you're just like, hey, there hasn't been any new development here in this city in years. The number of rental units is declining. What is going on? People can't even find housing anymore, much less affordable housing. And the only thing you have to do is the city council or the people who pass these laws need to look at themselves in the mirror and say, hey, we took away these landlords' ability to actually make money, and they just said they weren't going to invest here. So we have to change things, otherwise our city's going to die, okay? But, they're too pig-headed. They're pig-headed. They're too pig-headed to figure out that's exactly what's going to happen.